Hey y'all, I'm your Queen of Squiggles, and I'd like to introduce you to this series. I've been playing it out for a while, so I've got a bit to talk about in this first episode before we get running. By the end of the episode, we'll have a Godot installed and ready to go with writing a simple Hello World script in C#. Firstly, this is the Godot Mono first-person shooter tutorial series. I want to go through this project as transparently as possible, and I plan to teach this series aimed at someone who has a little bit experience with game development. Ideally, someone who has tried to make a game before, but even if you haven't finished it, you still gain some experience from it. That's what we need here. It'll be much easier if you already are familiar with Godot or with C#, but it's not required. I'll have a screen key overlay that should pop up for any hotkeys that I forget to mention. I'll be assuming also that you know how to install most software on your computer. There will be some things that I'll explain, such as Godot and Hourglass, but that's coming later. I wrote out a big blog post over on my Ko-fi for you to read for all the information you need. In summary, this series is currently planned to be 16 episodes, where at the 16th episode I'll be reviewing how the series went so far and deciding where to take it next, or if I should drop it off from lack of interest or excitement. I'm going to be mentioning my Ko-fi quite a few times throughout this series because if I make enough money through these donations, I could switch to making this series and maybe even other series full-time. That'd let me get videos out faster and maybe with a little more quality too. So to try to incentivize you to become a monthly sponsor of me, I'll be releasing every episode for this series exclusively for my supporters on all tiers for a few days before releasing the video publicly. The cheapest tier right now is a single US dollar monthly, and so hopefully it should be inexpensive enough that plenty of people can join if they want to. A note on how I will be developing this series is I will be creating a GitHub repository where the code will sit under a Creative Commons license. I'll make a separate branch for each episode so that if you want to pick up the code midway through, then you can just choose where on the repo. I will be assigning homework for several episodes. These homeworks are not necessarily required, but they're highly encouraged as part of the lesson plan I've been crafting. I'm only calling them homework because I've always wanted to be a computer science teacher, and so far this is as close as I've gotten. Feedback. I need feedback. Please, please, please. Not just for the algorithm, but also just so that I know that this is something actual people are interested in. Tell me what you like and tell me what you don't like. The like and dislike buttons only give me so much. Tell me if there's something I could do better. I want this and any series I do later to be the best they possibly can be. But in order to do that, I need to know the preferences of the people watching my videos. For this series, at least to start, we'll be using the Godot 3.5. As of recording, the latest available version for release is the release candidate 8, which it should have most, if not all, features of the 3.5 release. And it may just be a little bit less stable. So if you're in the future, I highly recommend using the full 3.5 release. If you're following a few days afterwards, you're probably with me on the release candidate 8. All right, so if we're downloading from the Godot website, the official godotengine.org, you can go to the downloads page, and this page will always show you the latest stable release. So right now, that's 3.4.4. We want to go to the 3.5 release candidate 8, and that'll be in the downloads repository. If you want, you can try to follow along in 3.4. Make sure you download the mono version. That's where you actually have C# support, and pick the architecture that fits your computer. If you don't know, definitely check. Most computers I would expect to be running 64-bit, but I could definitely be wrong. Now, the download repository is not as pretty, but you can go down and you can find 3.5, and then the latest RC release candidate is RC8. And then we have all these downloads and this little folder for mono. And these are all the mono versions. And so Linux, you're going to want X11, Windows is Windows, OS X is Mac. And there's a few other options up here, but most of those you don't need. And so for me, I would download this one here and save it. Now, an alternative, if you're likely to be using multiple versions of Godot, it's really helpful to use maybe a third-party launcher, such as Hourglass. I use Hourglass so much because it helps with managing installs. It makes it super easy. You can even add custom engine builds as an install if you like. And you can manage all your projects in one place, regardless of which version they're in. As you can see on the preview, there's a few different versions for all these projects. And so on here, you can download, again, I'm on Linux, so it's telling me to download for Linux. And so you would download it, get your download. All right, and now that they're downloaded, they're in my downloads folders, and both of them are just zip files with the executable. And so for me, I would take this and put it somewhere and run it, and we'll have Hourglass. So what we'll do is we'll just extract here with a subfolder, extract here. We can delete those. And so this will be Godot 3.5. And that'll open up all of my projects that I've been doing. There's a few of these that are fun. And it even is copying my editor theme. You can see it's 3.5, RC8, official, I assume that's the commit name. Alternatively, you can open up Hourglass, which I will be showing examples from Hourglass because it is much easier to use, and I highly recommend using it if you can. Otherwise, the Godot launcher works just fine. You have to click to show mono versions and show beta versions. The available versions are down here. You'll have your installed up here. You're going to want to install 3.5 RC8 mono. And so you just scroll down to the version you want, click install, it'll load, and then you'll have it all at the ready. So then you can go up here, you can hit new project, and I'm going to call this Godot Mono FPS tutorial series. And one of the greatest things about Hourglass is you can initialize with a Git repository. I love that because then I don't have to go and screw with the files and make it work. So we're going to make sure to change our Godot version to RC8 mono. We'll do ES3. I only use ES2 if I'm making a desktop software tool. ES3 usually if I'm making a game. Now I'm going to change it to go from into my repos folder because I have a organization structure where I separate the projects that I export, or the projects that I port up to GitHub, and the ones that I just leave on my computer and never edit. Now, another thing that could be useful to you is to add your launcher, either Godot or Hourglass, as a desktop application on your system. On Linux, there is an application called Menu Editor. And on Mac and Windows, I assume there are some similar comparable applications. And you can set it up as a launcher so that I can go, and I have it set up so I type Godot and it gives me the Hourglass launcher. All right, because we're going to be using C# with Godot, there are some extra requirements that you can see on the project page. You can use .NET SDK or the Mono SDK. In my experience, it works better to have both installed, but I don't know why. So you can find both of them there. The link's over. There's instructions on how to install. It should automatically give you for your operating system. So mine is recommending Linux, but there's the Mac OS and Windows and Docker if you're feeling spicy. And you're just going to want to download those and install them on your computer. In addition, Godot does not have an internal editor for C#. At least it does not work nearly as well as anything you could get externally. If you're recently moving from Unity, your preferred editor is probably already supported. Visual Studio Code, JetBrains Rider, and Mono Develop are all supported. And for me, I like to use Visual Studio Code. It runs well on Linux, and I like the customizability of it. And so if you want to follow along exactly with me, you can download that and install it. Should be pretty easy for Mac and Windows users as well. And so once you get those all installed, we'll move on to the next segment. All right, so now that we're inside the editor, there's a few settings that we're gonna wanna set, and there's a few that are optional, but I'm gonna walk you through them anyway because I feel like they provide a much better experience of Godot. Now, the very first thing we need to do is let the C# project solution be built. And so you're gonna go to Project and Tools and C#, and we're going to create the C# solution. This only needs to be done once for your project to run, but if you forget to do this, many things will not work. I often forget to do this when I make a new project, and then I'm confused as to why I can't run anything in C#, why none of my scripts are working, and why the autocomplete is broken. This is why. Make sure to remember to create your C# solution. It only needs to happen once, but you have to do it. And now you can see we have our MS build down here, and we have a build button up here. And so what that'll do, you can also hit Alt-B. And so I'll do that now. And there's my screen keys. And that will build the project solution. Basically, compiling. And so because we do not have any code, it should be easy, it should run. If it gives you any errors down here, then you have a problem. Now we can scroll down here, build succeeded, 0 warning, 0 errors. It took 5 seconds. So now that we have that done, we can go into the editor settings. So we have editor settings, and you want to scroll all the way down. We have this mono section. And so we'll go to editor first. And this is where we'll choose an external editor. And so your choices are disabled, which you don't want. Mono Develop, Visual Studio Code, and JetBrains Rider. I believe on Windows it'll also allow you to do Visual Studio, the more beefy version of Visual Studio Code, but on Linux, since it's not even supported, it doesn't show up. So I want Visual Studio Code. Make sure to pick the editor you're going to use. And then for builds, you choose your build tool. You can use .NET or Mono, and this is why it says that it's an either or. For me, I use Mono and I have both installed. For some reason, Mono works better than .NET for me, but if it's not working, try switching to .NET and see if that makes any difference. So now that those are set up, we should be able to do some scripting. But first, I do want to show you some ways to make using the editor a lot easier. So first of all, there's the editor language, there's the display scale, there's the main font size and the code font size, and I like to have a 125% display scale. I like to increase the font tinting. This is with light. And I like to have normal, which makes the font a little bit bigger and kind of thicker, which is easier to see on my screen, and hopefully on yours as well. Now the main font bold, and the code font, those are all something that should be empty on yours, and I have them set to a Noto Sans display and Noto Sans mono. They're part of the Noto Sans font family, which is pretty reasonable, and from what I can tell, they're part of their open font license, which basically is a pretty permissible license, although it doesn't matter for your personal editor. And so if you want to change the fonts of your editor, you'll have to have the actual TrueType font file, which an easy place to get it is from Google Fonts. You can scroll through all of the options and find something you like. Personally, I have Noto Sans, just this one here. But you can choose any font you like, even a more fun, fancy font if you feel like it, but highly recommend choosing something that is easily readable. And so a sans serif font Ideally something that you would use for subtitles. Use it for your editor. It'll save you effort. It'll make life so much easier. And also make sure your font size is something you like. If it's hard on your eyes for how small it is, you can up it to 125%. You can even go to 200% or a custom value, and that'll help you see what you need to see. Now, a fun way to change the look and feel of your editor is to make a custom theme. I like to use this kind of theme, and there's an even more custom theme you could use as a file, but I use the inbuilt options. And so very quickly change all of these back to the defaults. And so if you see here, this should be what you see. And so what you can do is you can change into the different themes, and each of them will have their own presets, and you can pick one you like. But what I like to do is I like the alien font, but instead of a green accent, I really like to have like a bright pink. And so wait a second and that'll update. And then we'll change this and make it more of a purple. Give it kind of a like that. Contrast, I personally like having more contrast on my screen, so I go up to a 0.75 contrast. I want the relationship lines, which show the relationship between different tree elements. I put it all the way up to 1 so I can see it 100%. I'll up the border size to 2. Just gives a little bit more padding around things, which is how I like it. And so you can see that it updates instantly. So play around, find something that you like, feels nice, looks nice, easy to read. Always, always, always easy to read. That is, I don't know how much strain I put on my eyes trying to see things when I didn't have enough contrast to see it. I might have a color deficiency in my eyes, and that might be why I need such a high contrast in my theme, but it makes it more readable, and that's always more important. Now that we have everything all put together how we like it, let's make our first script and ensure everything's working properly. So we're going to make a 3D scene, and that'll make our spatial node here. And we'll name it by double clicking Hello World, and we'll save it, hitting Control S. And I'll just save it in the root here as hello world.tscn. That's a text scene file. And there it is there. So now you can see it's named here. We have the named file that it's saved as, and our tab up here in the scene editor. Now right here, we're going to go up to this button here. Just attach a new or existing script. Yes, please. And so you can see this little dialog. The language, we want to change this. There's a few options out of the box, but we want C#. Inherit some spatial. Leave the template as the default. There are no others. We can change the name of this. I'm going to remove the space because that tends to work better in my experience. And we'll create. And it should open up our editor. And it did it on my second screen. So pop that open. And now we have here our script. And as you can see, OmniSharp is running. Make sure for your extensions, you're going to want C# enabled. All the C# options. And then also C# tools for Godot. This extension is highly useful for making a Godot Mono project. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into here and we're going to go for Godot. You can see C# Godot, generate assets for build and debug. We want that, and that should run. And now we have our run and debug options for playing in the editor, launch, selecting a scene, and attach. Generally, you're going to want play in editor. And what this lets you do is you can run it from here. As long as you have Godot open to the project, you can run it from your editor. And if you have breakpoints, or if you have something that you want to watch, all of your regular debugging tools that you have in VS Code will work for this. And so that's really helpful. Now we're going to start out. We've got this standard C# script. We're going to remove this and this. Those are both comments, don't need them. I'm going to control scroll to make it a bit bigger. Got our using statements, public class hello world spatial, and the public override void underscore ready. And if you're familiar with GD script, it'll be underscore ready as the function name, and then a semicolon, and you'll do your code. In C#, it's Pascal case, which is where every single word gets a capitalized letter at the start, whereas in GD script, it's snake case. Now here we're going to want GD dot print, and printing out what we want to say, hello world. Give a little heart there to be nice. End it with a semicolon. Save it. Shouldn't have any errors. And we should be able to run play in editor. And if you're missing something, it needs a main scene. And so you can change it later. You can select one now, or you can select the current open scene. That's the one we have now. Let's go for it. It's going to build the project solution automatically every time you hit run. And so you can see our scene open. There's nothing in it because we haven't added anything. And it says, hello world here in the console. And so that is working perfectly. See our code compiled. It's running. We stopped it there. Now it's not. We have one error in the debugger because this version of Godot forgot to make an icon. So I'll have to add an icon myself. I'll make a fun one anyway for us, just so it's not the default Godot icon, which would be the icon you see for the application it opens here. That's the default that it loaded from somewhere. But I'll make us a custom one that we can put on there. So if you ran the script, everything's working, you got your hello world, you are done. You did it. My homework for this episode would be to play around and make your own theme. What you can do as well is you can go to this plus button and you can see all the nodes that you see. And so what I recommend is going through the spatial, especially, or all the 3D nodes, and look at all the different ones that you can find. See if there's anything interesting to you. And if you want to look up more about it, the docs on the website are super helpful. There's information on almost every node, and if there isn't, there's probably someone working to add it. So feel free to check it out and play around, get familiar with the editor. I hope everything went well for you this episode. I know the first episode is always boring, but I hope that you are feeling ready to get going for the next episode, where we'll be hitting the ground running, making a simple kinematic character controller. Remember, monthly sponsors get to see these episodes a few days early on my Ko-fi, so look into that if you can't wait. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you think. Have a great day.